So today, I hope everybody's going to be attentive because there's going to be some amazing opportunity at the end of my talk. And so hopefully, let's see how that goes. So today, I'm going to be talking about open source, AI, and privacy. 3 topics in one. So hopefully, I leave this stage inspiring you all to do more around open source. Like they mentioned, we're in an era where everybody, I think on Thursday, there was the open source track on Web3, and I was at the back sitting, listening to everybody wants to contribute. Push code, go to Google Summer of Code, Outreachy. Every single day, people are talking about, oh, I want to do this, I want to do that. And that's really, really amazing because I used to remember 10 years, 7 years ago when if you ask somebody, oh, what is open source? It was like, oh, what's that term? And now that we have community managers, programmers, and all building in open source, and that's like one of the beauty about it. So what inspired my talk is because 3 weeks ago, I was at GitHub Universe, and they announced that as of October, Nigeria alone, we have over 1.5 million developers, or at least 1.5 million people that have accounts on GitHub. And that's kind of like interesting. Why that is good, statistically what that means is every 100 person, or roughly around 120 person you meet, 1 or 2 people understand code. But again, if you look back, you kind of wonder, why are we having less companies, projects? The goal of a software engineer or even a designer or anybody in technology the goal is like, oh, I want to have a remote job. Speaking of which, how many people here want to end up having a remote job? Don't be shy, raise up your hand now. Don't be shy now. Okay, thank you. What if you want to build something? Like you feel like you want to build the next Flutter Wave. You want to build something amazing that you can hire more Nigerians. You don't want to be a co-founder. You don't want to be a founder. Are you shy? Raise your hand. There might be an angel investor here. Raise your hand. Great. But how many of you here want to be an individual contributor forever? I just want to be an employee. Soft boy, soft babe, receiving salary. Okay, that's quite interesting. But I thought you guys want remote jobs. What's happening? Yeah, so just a little bit about me and why you're listening to me. I co-founded one of the important open source group called Open Source Community Africa, roughly around late 2017. And the reason why that happened was because I was at Google Summer of Code Mentor Summit in Mountain View, and I realized that there's a lot of people that contribute to open source, build projects, act as a maintainer or as a contributor, but end up don't having the opportunity to share their voice globally. And then I came back, I remember meeting my co-founder, Adaun Dukaoyom, the founder of She Code Africa, and we were having, of course, the downside, you see the jollof rice. We were having jollof rice at White House. I don't know if many of you know White House in Yaba. Okay, I can see some loyalty. And we thought about, what if we start from advocating and we get people to know more about this movement, but then as a way for them to build? Because again, Nigeria, we're a very young population, and the average age of a software engineer wouldn't even survive in the standard industry. You need about 5 to 10 years of experience. But in programming, or even in design, all you need is your laptop. And then you start working, and then you start seeing people being a staff engineer at the age of 25, or people being the age of 22, leading design in big companies. And that's kind of like the vision. And I feel like we've done enough, and that's the beauty even about DevFest. And that's why I really, really love coming to DevFest, is because I feel like we've learned a lot. And the most important thing now is to make sure that, we're building. And that's kind of the whole era of why I'm sharing this talk. But of course, we can't talk about building without talking about AI. Who here is yet to use AI in some way somehow, living under the rock. I see one person there. Okay. What about using AI to express yourself like a virtual therapist? Of course. Series of guilty, right? Great. The beauty about AI now, especially, when you're looking at use cases like the, ChatGPT and the likes, is because it's not like it's new in some level. It's because you can be able to interact and chat in multiple ways. But then at some point, you start sharing sensitive information. And then sometimes you wonder, or you want to believe, it's because it's OpenAI now. Or maybe my case is not that deep. So I don't really think I should care about why I should say that I love eating rice and egusi soup. Or like mixing something weird. I know I have a friend here that she has a very weird combo with how she eats. But again, you sort of start sharing a lot of sensitive information, but you somehow trust the process because you believe that, again, your data might not be that important. So my talk is going to be in two levels. One, you acting as a builder, and one, you becoming a builder. And the core principle here is just, again, thinking about the tactical playbook of how you can become a builder. So, this is the builder's playbook. You're building something that goes into AI. You want to make the code public or open, and you want to do stuff around privacy. Why? Because building in the open makes things faster. As you're going on Twitter, using Reddit, or sharing using forum, a lot more people are giving you feedback real time compared to how other companies tend to receive information. You're constantly using your users or people that are interested in your project, and you're actively iterating. The second part, which a lot of engineers probably don't care about, is trust. You're going into a GitHub repo, you're pulling a package, and you just believe because it's open source, it is safe. Maybe, maybe not. And then, of course, because we live in Nigeria, where we live in a very low-trust society, if your product is moving around data, then privacy isn't going to be an option. It needs to be the default. Now, let's talk about a lot of misconception. I have a few points. AI. Anyways, open source, of course, at this point, I don't need to define anything. Open source is the foundation of some or most modern AI. I don't want to use the word every, so I don't trigger people's thought process. But the reason for that is because open code, like I explained earlier, gives you the eye on the system. But at the same time, as you're trying to consume a code on GitHub, or you're contributing to a code, or you're trying to download the code, somebody with different opinion or different intent is also seeing the same code. So how do you tend to believe what code to use or what code not to use? And that's why at the end of the day, we end up having a lot of attacks. Just about 2 weeks ago, we've seen one vendor going down, the next vendor going down. 1 minute, we can't even come to Twitter to rant anymore because Twitter also went down. So I remember I think I was somewhere hosting an hackathon in a different event. And I was like, okay, I need to tweet it. I'm coming to DevFest. And I opened Twitter. I was like, what's going on? I'm in London now. What's going on? Like, the network is not working. And then I realized that, the internet, I was blaming the network. And then eventually I realized that, Twitter wasn't working. And I froze. I was like, wait, how do I now complain about Twitter? Then I went back to Instagram to post. and then some of my friends that are, different platforms. And that kind of shows you a lot about, thinking about supply chain. There's a term called supply chain security that I'm not going to explain more, but again, as an engineer, I think you should think about building secure software going forward. Now, privacy isn't secrecy. I know sometimes English is a very interesting word or language, so sometimes when we use words, we often have this weird bias, like, oh, I need my privacy, or like, oh, you don't want to share this secret. And then sometimes we just kind of confuse both in a way. Now, open source, on the other hand, is all about transparency, the ability to see code. Now, that makes sense if you're looking at it from a code point of view. But then at the moment you start building and you start onboarding users, and users are going to your platform and telling them about deep secrets, you start thinking about, how do I manage those sort of information? Again, secrecy is like locking data in a black box. It's a silo. Hey, stay away from that. But imagine a situation in the context of AI. If everybody tends to hold information back, what data do you want to use to train your LLMs? You can't even collaborate. You definitely can't build open source stuff. But on the other hand, privacy is flexible. It gives you the ability to control and to give context. So it's not even about hiding the data, but it's ensuring that the data serve its purpose, especially when you're dealing with human beings. So you can be able to take a lot of information without disclosing that Samson Goddy was the one that shared that data with you, or Samson is at this certain age or earns this certain salary, and all the things that we often tend to overshare. And that comes to the next level, which is, again, privacy-first development, or privacy-first AI development. I just talked a little bit about this. I would sort of breeze through on this to the next slide. And then, I really love this name because I remember I was telling my friend that, it was like, where do you work now? I was like, I work at midnight. So I was like, yeah, I know you always work at night. And I'm like, no, I really work. And it's so ironic because my preferred working hours always overlap to 12 a.m. So it's always very awesome when I tend to explain to my friends like, hey, I'm up all night working at midnight, which is so interesting. But again, I'm not going to explain too much about that, but I want to give you a story. I want to walk you all into something, especially when you're thinking about privacy. So, Midnight is an open source blockchain, and I love the previous speaker from Beatrust team. I really love the Beatrust team anyways. So it's like really, really amazing. And I think he did a really great job explaining what blockchain is. So I'm not even going to explain what that is again. But the most important part here is it gives you things out of the box. Like encrypted storage you can trust, verifiable execution you can prove, and then many more. Now, imagine the use case. I was just talking to the host. I was like, is there going to be a party? And then the host said, yes. I said, love it. I love it. I love when a tech event ends with a party. How many of you here were at Oscar Fest this year? You wait enough to attend the after party, apart from some faces here. You see, people don't like to, okay, I see, okay, we have a lot of godly people here. I love it. Keep up your good faith here. But I imagine a scenario where, they're sharing alcohol. And of course, because DevFest is a really wide range audience, right? And then the bouncers at the door is now looking at verification just to make sure that, the team isn't putting themselves into big trouble by giving alcohol to under the age of 18-year-old folks. But now imagine that process. Think about that process of trying to manually verify over 3,000 audience into a hall. So what's going to happen now is the bouncer at the outside will take the card and be like, okay, Again, the primary focus is this person over the age of 18? But then the bouncer will see your first and last name, your address, possibly your local government, because we Nigerians, we love to tell us, we like, hey, I'm from this place, I'm from that place. But at the end of the day, you share very unnecessary information just because you want to prove that you're over the age of 18. There's a lot of things. This is just one use case. But then when you go back, you think about, okay, how many times have I shared information that I don't really, really need just to prove that I can be able to, I can be able to afford buying this car, or you want to take up a loan from the bank and they tell you should go and carry the skeleton of a mosquito, or a lot of things, just because they want to be able to prove that you can be able to afford or to take up that challenge. Now, community-driven innovation. Now, prior to this slide, I was focusing about builders, people that already build. The startup founders, people that are in the blockchain space, in the Web3 space, that are actively building amazing stuff. Now, I know most of you here, this is probably your first time attending a tech event, but then you want to start to do something. You want to leave this place and go and open up your own company, or just become an independent contractor, or just, again, earn money so that this December, obule go obule. You understand? And that's kind of what this other side of my talk is going to focus on. Again, my job, or most DevRel, people that do DevRel, we often work a lot with developers, people that are building, founders, and so forth. And then one thing I've noticed among builders, regardless of the experience, it's the journey, how they tend to move from just learning Hello World in Python, for example, because I'm not going to say JavaScript, and then end up building something like Instagram because it's powered by, Django, right? There's a certain kind of journey that goes when you're trying to build. One of the ways that we've coined stuff internally for us is we've seen developers going and finding things like bounty program. I used to run a bounty program about 5-6 years ago with an organization called Open Source Collective, where you go and fix code and you get paid. But then there are security bounties. Even Google hosts things around security, and you go, you fix the code, find vulnerability, you fix it, and then you end up getting paid. I know a lot of people that have dedicated their whole life finding bounties, and that's amazing because there's a lot of things you're going to fix. But then the most important thing here is you see people finding bounty program, attending hackathon. In fact, just about 72 hours ago, I was in London hosting our first ever in-person hackathon where we invited about 200 hackers globally. And most of them are vibe coders. Some of them have really great experience. But then at the end of the day, we hosted them for about 3 days. They formed a team in person, and they started hacking. And I started noticing how people start up having fun companies. And then eventually, of course, with the prizes and the things where we designed for that hackathon to support them, if you go back and ask other founders, that's kind of like the journey on how they started, which is, again, going to a hackathon, winning the prize, and then continue building. And then, of course, that teaches you important thing, meaning as you're hacking, you're sharing, you're doing a whole lot of things, you're constantly seeing mistakes and you're fixing it. And then, of course, ideas keeps growing. And then, of course, if you're building in the open, security becomes everybody's job because everybody's constantly looking the repos, making sure that things are organized. Maintainers have the job of reviewing every pull request. Everything is very organized. Now, there are a lot of things like the Build Club. I'm using the Build Club, for example, because I'm talking about my organization. We have this thing called the Build Club where if you're building any privacy-related app, using Midnight or not using Midnight, whether you're in Web 2, Web 3, whatever, it's kind of like an 8 weeks part-time educational program, where you get your idea, and then eventually get into our program, and then you get access to like over $100,000 worth of resources, tools, credits, money, whatever. But then there are other form of programs that are like the Build Club, of course. The Build Club is just one of thousands. Like I mentioned, people will go open the docs, they go and look at apps. In Web3 they call it dApps, decentralized apps. But at the end of the day, it's all apps. And then you find bounties. I tweeted something on my Twitter about content bounties. How many of you saw that tweet? The content bounty I posted on my Twitter. How many of you have claimed one of the bounty? Here. Okay, interesting. I'm going to fix that. I have like 2 specific bounties on this slide that I'm going to share. But this kind of gives you an idea of how people tend to go from being an engineer, designer, whatever, and then go to that process, eventually speeding up into real products. So, you can take a photo of that if you're trying to figure out ways to move from being an individual developer down to building a company, or maybe building an open source project. It's still all in the same process. Like I mentioned, again, I keep talking about building in public. As an engineer, think about trust. Treat privacy as part of what you're building. When you scale the system, what people typically do that we've seen is they go join Discord, again, typical of the blockchain Web3 side of things, and then they spin up the effects example applications or see an existing application to try to understand the architecture. And then they use AI to learn things like Compact. So Compact is our own smart contract language that is TypeScript-based. So you go, again, using the hackathons, I've seen people using AI to understand things. And then, of course, they vibe with front end using things like Copilot and all that, which is pretty awesome. And then they built something real fast. We saw teams go from just meeting each other for the first time to winning thousands of dollars just about 3 days ago. So if you're interested in joining, learning more stuff, trying to make things more actionable, you can scan the QR code. It takes you to a questing platform where we gamified how you can, basically when somebody tells you, oh, visit our Discord, visit whatever, it's always crazy to go through that as a beginner and trying to find your way around. So we've made it easy for you to know what action to take, and we've gamified that process using a questing system that every engagement you make within our ecosystem, you get points, and then you get rewarded for that. And then, like I said, the bounty program, you can take a photo of that. So the bounty program basically is a content bounty program that enable everybody here and people beyond to come in, read the doc, read the technical docs, and teach people on how to build on midnight. But then the cool thing about that is that the content bounty program pays you from $300 as high, and then up until $1,000, I think. So I think one of those links, I don't know which one, whether the first or the second. Again, take photos of that. I think the first one is the one that can pay you up to $1,000, and then the other one pays you roughly around $300 to $500. And then if you go to the link with the one saying learn more, we are constantly uploading content that you can come in and you can claim. So, thank you.
Thank you very much for the session. So I want to ask about open source. So I want to ask, why is open source mostly restrictive? Like, if you contribute to open source, you do not own the code, and also you can't sell it. For instance, what are copyrights that we should look for?
Could you rephrase the first question, please? The first question, please.
So I'm saying that open source is restrictive. That you do not own the code, and you can also sell it. So what copyright should we look for while we try to contribute to open source projects that are out there? So that is the basis of my question.
Interesting. Without trying to confuse people, because there's open source licensing, is every project that somebody hosts being a maintainer or being a host is, for example, at Midnight, we use a certain license. So before you contribute to any open source project, and you really want to understand how they use your code, if they're using your code to make money without sharing money to you, or maybe you're building for good cause, maybe writing a piece of line of code that will send somebody to Mars, for example, you would always want to look at the license. So again, open source gives you opportunity to give people permission and how people tend to use the project. So there are people that, for example, if I go to your GitHub and I clone your repo, there's a certain restrictions that I might not be able to do or to use. So again, that's why, for example, open source as an ethos is all about transparency. But then when you start going into open source in general, you start thinking about like, okay, permissions and how to use it, how to consume it. So for example, Android is Google's version of an open operating system, open source. But then of course, Google as a company wants to make money with Android. Then they go ahead to upload things like proprietary applications like your Gmail, your all the Google suites that you probably know, and then they make money from that. But of course, you can still go on and contribute to Android because again, fundamentally on the core, it is open source. So I don't know if that answers your question or, you're welcome. Thank you.